the pain of seeing differently. There comes a moment in every awakening soul when the world you once trusted begins to dissolve before your eyes. You start to see patterns others deny, motives they disguise, and truths they fear. And that vision, that piercing clarity, feels like both a gift and a curse. In this journey, we'll uncover why those who see what others don't often become outsiders. Through Jung's psychology, we'll explore why deeper perception isolates the soul, and how to survive the loneliness that follows enlightenment. The awakening, the pain of seeing differently. Most people live within a shared dream, a collective illusion built from unspoken agreements. We agree not to question too deeply. We agree to pretend that what's easy is also true. We agree that comfort is worth more than clarity. But sometimes, something inside a person refuses to obey. It begins as a subtle disquiet, a small, persistent whisper in the back of your mind. Something isn't right here. You notice inconsistencies others ignore. You sense emotional undercurrents no one else feels. You recognize manipulation disguised as love, conformity masquerading as morality. At first, you think it's your imagination, but then you realize it's not you who's asleep, it's everyone else. And that realization, that seeing, marks the beginning of a dangerous transformation, the birth of vision. Jung wrote that the process of individuation begins when the soul dares to look inward. To see what others don't is not simply an act of intelligence, it's an act of courage. Because true vision doesn't flatter the ego. It exposes it. It doesn't comfort you. It strips you of illusions. It tears away the false layers of who you thought you were and reveals something raw, ancient, and painfully alive beneath. For Jung, awakening meant confrontation with the shadow, the hidden, repressed, and denied aspects of the psyche. When you begin to see what others don't, you're not just seeing the world differently, you're seeing yourself differently. You're forced to face the parts of your being that were buried under years of conditioning and collective thought. And once you see, you can't unsee the isolation of the awakened mind. Imagine standing in a crowded room where everyone is speaking a language you no longer understand. They laugh, they celebrate, they find meaning in the same things they always have. But to you, it all feels hollow. That's the price of seeing what others don't. Alienation. Jung observed that the awakening individual often feels cast out of the tribe, not by malice, but by difference. Your consciousness expands beyond the collective frame. You start to see patterns that contradict what society believes. You become aware of manipulation, fear, and projection in ordinary conversations. And suddenly, belonging becomes impossible without betrayal. You can't fit in without dimming your light. So you begin to withdraw, not out of arrogance, but survival. Because truth burns through superficiality, and the crowd resents the flame when the light becomes a burden. There's a hidden paradox in spiritual awakening. The more light you carry, the more shadow you must face. The moment you start seeing what others don't, you also begin to feel what others repress. You feel their envy, their fear, their hostility, all aimed at the one who reflects what they refuse to acknowledge. Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And when your presence mirrors their unconscious, they run, they attack, or they turn you into a threat. You become the mirror that no one wants to look into." In myth, this is the fate of Cassandra, cursed to see the future yet never be believed. It's the story of the prophet, the mystic, the truth seeker, and the empath who feels too deeply in a world built on numbness. That the danger of seeing what others don't is that you can become isolated in your own vision, punished not for being wrong, but for being awake. The shattering of the old self when you first awaken, it doesn't feel like enlightenment. It feels like death. Everything familiar begins to fall apart. Your relationships, beliefs, ambitions. You start to question the meaning behind every pursuit you once chased. The job that once defined you feels meaningless. The friendships built on shared illusions dissolve. The love that once sustained you now feels conditional. Jung called this the night sea journey, a descent into the depths of the unconscious where the old self must die so that the real self can emerge. This death is not symbolic. It's emotional, psychological, and spiritual. You grieve the person you used to be and the world that once made sense. But this grief is sacred. It's the initiation every awakened soul must endure. Because only by losing the old world can you gain the eyes to see the new one. The temptation to go back to sleep. There's a moment in every awakening where the pain becomes unbearable. You think, maybe it's better not to know. You long for the comfort of ignorance, the simplicity of belonging. You remember how easy it was to laugh without thinking, to believe what everyone else believes, and yet, no matter how hard you try, you can't return. Because consciousness, once expanded, can never shrink back to its former limits. You are now marked by awareness, touched by a kind of sacred exile. The mirror effect, seeing what others don't, also changes how people see you. Your clarity disturbs them. Your silence feels like judgment. Your sensitivity triggers their shadows. Your authenticity reveals their pretenses. They'll project onto you the very darkness they refuse to face within themselves. You'll be accused of arrogance, coldness, or madness, when in truth, you're simply mirroring their unconscious fears. This is what Jung called the shadow projection. People project their inner conflicts onto those who refuse to conform to the collective lie. And so, awakening becomes not just a spiritual journey but a psychological crucifixion. You become the screen upon which others cast their unresolved shadows. Why Jung called it dangerous? Carl Jung warned that psychological awakening is perilous because it dismantles the ego's defenses. The ego, fragile and blind, cannot survive too much truth too quickly. That's why many who glimpse deeper realities retreat. They numb themselves, distract themselves, or deny what they've seen. Because to see what others don't means carrying truths too heavy for the ordinary mind. But Jung also believed that this danger is necessary. It's the crucible where transformation happens. Enlightenment, he wrote, is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious. The path of the outsider. When you see what others don't, you walk a lonely road. You no longer fit into the narratives of your culture. You begin to live between worlds, half in the visible, half in the unseen. And yet that's where the soul begins to mature, because solitude becomes the teacher, silence becomes the mirror, and the wilderness becomes the cathedral of your becoming. Every person who awakens walks this path. The mystic, the artist, the empath, the philosopher, they all endure the same exile, the pain of being too conscious in a world that prefers sleep. But there's a hidden promise within that pain. You are not alone in it. Others, too, are walking unseen, scattered souls who recognize truth in your voice. That's how kindred spirits find each other, through resonance in the dark, the inner voice that saves you. In the midst of this isolation, something miraculous begins to happen. The same inner voice that awakened you, the one that shattered your illusions, now becomes your guide. That it whispers not comfort, but direction. It leads you away from noise, toward authenticity. It urges you to create, to express, to make sense of what you've seen. That voice is your soul, your connection to the collective unconscious Jung spoke of, and it begins to reveal that seeing what others don't is not a curse, but a calling. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to see, and through that vision, to help others see themselves. The first integration, the pain of awakening, begins to ease when you realize that your task is not to convince others, but to understand yourself. The danger transforms into purpose. The loneliness becomes devotion. You stop trying to awaken others and start embodying the truth quietly, steadily, compassionately, because true sight is not about being superior, it's about being responsible. You carry knowledge that can heal, but only if you learn to bear it without bitterness. And that's where the real journey begins. To see what others don't is to die as the person you were and be reborn as who you truly are. Carl Jung paraphrased. Chapter 2. The Collective Blindness. Why the World Fears the Awakened Soul. There's a strange law of the psyche. The moment you awaken, the world begins to push back, because every awakening threatens the sleep of the collective. The collective illusion, Carl Jung once said, the larger the crowd, the more negligible the individual becomes. The modern world is built upon a subtle hypnosis, a collective agreement about what is real, right, and acceptable. This agreement protects society from chaos, but it also traps the soul in mediocrity. Most people are not individuals in the true psychological sense. They are extensions of the collective mind, repeating inherited beliefs, desires, and fears. They think they are choosing freely, but their choices are already written by the invisible hand of conformity. The awakened person, however, begins to see the strings. You notice how every opinion echoes another, how the same fears are sold through different faces, how morality itself bends to the demands of comfort and approval. And when you begin to see that, you start to stand apart. That's when the collective turns against you. The herd warned that humans are far less rational than they believe. Beneath civilization lies an ancient instinct, the herd instinct, which demands belonging above truth. To the collective mind, safety lies in similarity. Anyone who deviates threatens the group's illusion of stability. That's why the prophet is mocked. That's why the visionary is silenced. That's why those who see differently are often labeled as crazy, because difference is danger not to reality, but to the dream. When you awaken, You threaten to unravel the dream others are desperate to protect. They can't allow that, not consciously, so they call you arrogant, cynical, lost, or delusional. But what they truly mean is, you remind me of what I've refused to see. The fear of consciousness. Consciousness is terrifying. It demands responsibility for thoughts, actions, and emotions. It reveals the shadow, the darkness within that we would rather project onto others. So, instead of facing their own inner conflicts, people find someone else to blame. That's how scapegoats are created. That's how societies purge their guilt. By sacrificing the one who sees. Jung saw this archetype everywhere, from myths of Prometheus to the crucifixion of Christ, from Socrates to modern those who see what others don't become mirrors, and mirrors are always dangerous in a world built on denial. The unconscious collective described humanity as living within a collective unconscious, a vast psychic field containing the instincts, myths, and patterns of all time. This field shapes every culture, every religion, every social movement, but most people are unconscious of it. They live inside its patterns like fish unaware of water. The awakened person, however, begins to see the pattern itself. You start noticing archetypes unfolding in real life, heroes and villains, victims and saviors, all replaying timeless dramas. You see how society idolizes certain figures and demonizes others, not because of truth, but because of projection. You realize how wars, ideologies, and even trends are expressions of ancient symbols playing out through modern forms. And that realization isolates you, because now, you're not playing the game anymore. You're watching it, and when you stop playing, the game turns against you. The mechanism of rejection. The collective doesn't reject the awakened soul because it understands them, but because it feels them. Your presence disturbs the psychic equilibrium. You vibrate at a frequency that exposes dissonance in the field. People sense it before they can name it. They feel uneasy around you, defensive, inexplicably irritated. You haven't done anything wrong, you've simply stepped outside the invisible order. It's like stepping out of a dream, and then trying to wake others who are still dreaming. They'll call you mad for trying. The psychology of Jung explained that the human psyche will protect itself from unbearable truth through defense mechanisms, projection, repression, rationalization. When the awakened person speaks truth, these defenses activate like antibodies. The collective psyche fights to preserve its dream. You say, "Look, the emperor has no clothes." And they respond, "You're jealous, bitter, negative." You point out hypocrisy. They accuse you of arrogance, but these are not conscious lies, they're psychological reflexes. The ego cannot bear contradiction without shattering. So it fights back, not with logic, but with emotional violence. The myth of the blind kingdom. There's an ancient parable. A traveler enters a kingdom where everyone is blind. He tries to describe colors, light, and the sun, but the people laugh. They call him insane, accuse him of blasphemy, and eventually drive him out. This story is not about ignorance, it's about comfort. The blind kingdom is at peace because it doesn't have to confront its limitations. The moment someone introduces new perception, it disturbs the order. That's the essence of Jung's insight. The world doesn't fear darkness, it fears illumination, because illumination reveals what we've built upon illusion. Mass thinking and the death of the soul. Jung warned that the greatest danger of the modern world was mass. When individuals surrender their inner authority to the crowd, the soul begins to die. We start to believe that truth is what's popular, not what's real. We define morality by majority approval, and the quiet voice of conscience, the whisper of the soul, is drowned by the roar of the collective. Those who awaken from this hypnosis face an unbearable choice: conform and lose your soul, or stand apart and lose the world. Most people choose the world, but the few who choose the soul, they become the seed of humanity's renewal. The projection of evil. Every collective needs an enemy, an other to define itself against. When a person awakens, they often become that other. You become the target of unconscious projections. All the repressed fear, envy, and shame of others attached to you. They call you toxic, dangerous, unstable, because that's what their unconscious tells them. Jung wrote, "The evil that we see in others is the evil we do not wish to see in ourselves." So when the collective attacks the awakened soul, it's really attacking its own shadow. You become both scapegoat and mirror, crucified for revealing the darkness others refuse to claim. The hidden compassion of awareness. There's a deeper truth underneath the pain of rejection. The awakened person eventually realizes that others are not truly enemies, they're prisoners of the same blindness you once shared. Their hostility is fear. Their resistance is protection. Their ignorance is survival. To see this is to begin to love them, not sentimentally, but compassionately. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer waste energy convincing anyone. You begin to live quietly, radiating truth instead of preaching it. That's when vision matures into wisdom, the archetype of the wounded seer in Jungian terms. The awakened soul carries the archetype of the wounded seer. This archetype appears across myth: Odin sacrificing his eye for wisdom, Tiresias struck blind after glimpsing divine truth. Vision always comes with a price. You lose the comfort of belonging. You lose the certainty of ignorance. You lose the illusion of simplicity. But in that loss, you gain something the collective cannot imagine. Authenticity. You start to see beauty where others see chaos, meaning where others see pain. You begin to feel at home in uncertainty. You learn that loneliness is not emptiness. It's space for the soul to breathe. The role of the outsider: the world needs those who see what others don't, even if it rejects them, because the outsider is the unconscious conscience of the collective. You carry the awareness that the tribe has varied. You speak the words that truth demands, even when your voice shakes. Jung believed that every true transformation in history began with a rejected individual: the prophet in exile, the artist in poverty, the thinker condemned, all carrying pieces of the collective shadow toward light. To be awakened is to serve silently, painfully, but meaningfully. The mirror of shadow work to survive collective blindness. You must not fall into arrogance. You must continue to do your own shadow work, because the awakened can easily become what they oppose: self-righteous, detached, superior. Jung cautioned that the danger of awakening is inflation, the ego, identifying with divine vision and losing humility. The true seer remembers, I too am blind in ways I cannot yet see. That humility keeps your light from burning you. It transforms vision into service, not superiority. The paradox of return: once you've awakened, you can never fully rejoin the collective, but you can walk among them with awareness. You become a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious world. You speak softly. You listen deeply. You learn to see the divine hidden within the ordinary. This is the mature stage of individuation. You return to the world, not to escape it, but to serve it. Music shifts: melancholic piano turning hopeful. The awakened soul is not against the world, it's for the soul of the world. Inspired by Jung. Chapter 3. The burden of consciousness. Walking alone in the light. The moment you awaken, you inherit a strange solitude, a light that no longer lets you hide in the dark, and a darkness that follows wherever your light touches. The weight of knowing: to be conscious is to carry weight. Each insight becomes a stone you can't put down. Every illusion you pierce leaves another emptiness behind. Jung wrote that enlightenment is a moral burden of the highest order, because once you see, you are responsible for what you know. Ignorance is innocence. Awareness demands participation. You begin to realize that everything you do, every word, every silence sends ripples through the unconscious web, connecting all souls, and that realization humbles you. It keeps you awake at night, not from anxiety, but from reverence. You start to understand why so many people choose blindness. It is easier to drift than to steer the ship in stormy waters. The loss of companionship. The first cost of consciousness is belonging. The second is simplicity. Your conversations change. You can no longer laugh at cruelty disguised as humor, nor agree with the lies that grease social life. People sense your difference and quietly withdraw. You are left walking between worlds, to awake for the old, not yet at home in the new. At first, this exile feels unbearable, but gradually you learn to sit with silence like an old friend. You discover that solitude is not loneliness. It is sacred space, the womb where your real voice begins to form. The temptation of superiority in these early stages. The ego tries to reclaim ground by wearing enlightenment as armor. It whispers, you see more because you are more, but that voice is the old self in disguise. Jung called this danger inflation, when the ego identifies with the self, mistaking access to the divine for ownership of it. The inflated seeker becomes a preacher instead of a participant, a critic instead of a creator. So the soul sends new trials, humiliations, losses, contradictions, each one designed to puncture pride and restore humility before the mystery. True vision always bows. The mirror of the shadow. Every new layer of light exposes deeper shadow. You find traces of the very ignorance you condemned in others living quietly inside you. The more you explore your own darkness, the less interest you have in judging anyone else's. Compassion replaces condemnation, for you see that we all stumble toward the same center, each blinded by a different aspect of the same light. This realization breaks something open, a tenderness that feels almost unbearable. You start to love humanity not because it is good, but because it is fragile. And you see that the purpose of seeing is not to escape the world, but to redeem it through understanding. Chapter 3, Part 2. Carrying the light through darkness. Those who walk in darkness with their own light soon discover light doesn't always save you from the dark. Sometimes, it only makes the shadows deeper. The descent of the awakened. Every transformation begins with descent. After the first burst of awakening, the thrill of clarity, the high of revelation, comes a quieter, heavier stage. The integration. It feels like losing all progress, like sliding backward into confusion. But this descent is sacred. It's how the light roots itself into reality. Jung called this the night sea journey. The hero, after glimpsing divine truth, must return to the underworld of his own psyche. He must face the parts still unredeemed, not with judgment, but with understanding, because enlightenment is not escape, it is illumination within the darkness. The companions of silence during this descent. Human companionship often fades completely. You speak a language few understand. You sense things that can't be translated into casual words. And so, the universe gives you different companions. Books that feel alive, memories that whisper lessons, moments in nature that speak directly to your heart. You begin to feel guided, not by logic, but by synchronicity. That mysterious pattern Jung described as a meaningful coincidence. You realize that the self, the deeper intelligence within, is orchestrating your solitude as a kind of schooling. Every encounter, every loss, every delay has a reason. And slowly, the loneliness becomes purpose. The weight of empathy. The more awake you become, the more you feel. You begin to sense the collective pain beneath ordinary life, the quiet despair behind laughter, the anxiety behind ambition. It's overwhelming. You want to save everyone, but Jung warned that empathy without boundaries becomes possession, the soul drowning in other people's shadows. So you learn the hardest lesson of awakening. You cannot carry everyone. You can only carry light and trust that those ready for it will find you when they're meant to. This is not detachment. It is sacred restraint. Compassion tempered by wisdom. The fire of responsibility with awareness comes an ethical demand. You start noticing when you speak unconsciously, when you manipulate, when you act from fear instead of love. Each small awareness burns. You can't unsee your own shadow once it's revealed, but this burning refines the soul. It purifies the motives behind your actions. It transforms spiritual knowledge from philosophy into lived integrity. The awakened person begins to realize the true danger of seeing what others don't is not persecution. It's the weight of responsibility for what you now know, because the more clearly you see, the less you can lie to others or to yourself. The architecture of inner strengths. There's a strange alchemy in solitude. What once felt like isolation slowly becomes strength. You start building invisible architecture inside yourself. Discipline, discernment, resilience. You learn how to hold tension without breaking, how to witness pain without drowning in it. Jung called this the process of individuation, the forging of a personality strong enough to carry the full range of human experience without collapsing. You begin to sense that consciousness is not a destination, but a craft, something refined every day, hammered in the fires of contradiction and patience. The inner guide appears at a certain depth of solitude. Something remarkable happens. You begin to feel a presence not outside, but within. It's subtle at first, like a voice beneath thought, a quiet awareness guiding you through chaos. Jung called this archetype the wise old man or inner sage, the self communicating through intuition, dream, and symbol. It reminds you that you are never truly alone. Even in the valley of despair, the soul that awakened you walks beside you, and through that communion, the unbearable weight of consciousness becomes bearable, because you realize the light you carry is not yours, you are simply its keeper. To carry the light is not to escape the dark, but to become luminous within it. Chapter 3, Part 3. The gift hidden in loneliness. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the presence of your unintegrated self, calling you home. The long night of the soul. There comes a moment when even the most awakened soul questions its path. The insights that once felt divine now feel like burdens. You start to wonder, was this awareness a blessing or a curse? Everything familiar begins to lose meaning. Conversations sound hollow. The world's noise feels unbearable. This is what mystics and psychologists alike call the dark night of the soul, a period where all outer anchors dissolve, forcing you to face the raw silence of existence itself. Jung said, to confront the shadow is to risk losing the ground beneath your feet. And yet, This loss of ground is not destruction, it is the necessary collapse of false foundations so that something more authentic can be born. The mirror of emptiness in the depths of loneliness, your psyche reveals its architecture. You begin to see what you were built upon: approval, fear, identity, attachment. Each layer falls away, and for a while, you become no one. That is the hidden danger of awakening, the void that follows truth. But it's also its greatest secret, because when you become no one, you are free to become anything. The ego resists this death fiercely. It clings to names, roles, beliefs. It tells you, if I disappear, you will cease to exist. But the self, that deeper essence Jung spoke of, whispers back, you were never the mask. You are the awareness behind it. In that silent recognition, something eternal stirs. The hidden teacher of solitude. The human mind fears solitude because it mirrors our inner fragmentation. But if you stay long enough in that silence, it transforms from prison into temple. Solitude is not punishment. It's initiation. It strips away distraction so you can hear the whisper beneath all noise. The subtle voice of your own soul. Jung believed that individuation required this sacred alone, because without solitude, there is no dialogue between the ego and the self. There is only conformity. And conformity, he warned, is the enemy of the soul's growth. So the one who walks alone is not abandoned. They are being refined. The fire of isolation is shaping them into something rare, a conscious human being. The resurrection of meaning. At some mysterious point in this descent, a shift occurs. You start noticing beauty again in small, forgotten places. A bird's song feels like a revelation. A stranger's kindness pierces the armor you thought was permanent. Meaning begins to return, but differently. It's quieter now, humbler, no longer tied to success, validation, or recognition. You begin to see that meaning is not something the world gives you. It's something the soul creates moment by moment when it's aligned with truth. And suddenly, the loneliness that once felt unbearable starts to glow with quiet strength. You realize it was never emptiness, it was spaciousness. Room for the divine to enter. Alchemy of the heart when loneliness turns to silence, and silence turns to presence. A new intelligence awakens in the heart. It's not logical. It doesn't speak in language. It feels like warmth, a radiant stillness that needs no justification. This is what Jung hinted at when he said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Loneliness is the crucible through which this becoming occurs. It melts away false attachments, leaving only the gold of essence. A consciousness no longer dependent on others for its sense of worth. This is spiritual alchemy, turning isolation into intimacy with the self. The silent brotherhood. Once you emerge from this inner night, you begin to notice others, quiet souls who carry the same light. They rarely speak about it, but when your eyes meet, there's recognition. No words needed. You both know the cost of that light and the grace of having survived the dark. This is the true spiritual community, not built around belief, but around presence. A brotherhood of the unseen, walking quietly through the world, each holding a flame for those still lost in shadow. And perhaps this is what Jung meant when he said that individuation is not isolation but integration with the deeper whole. The more you become yourself, the more connected you are to the soul of everything. The ones who survive the night do not return the same. They return luminous and silent, carrying peace no storm can touch. Chapter 3 Part 4 The Return. Living among the unawakened. Enlightenment is not escape. It is learning how to carry light in a world that still sleeps. The return to the ordinary world after the storm of awakening. You find yourself standing once again in the ordinary world. The same streets, the same faces, but nothing feels the same. Colors are sharper. Words carry weight. Silence hums with unseen meaning. You've returned from the underworld of your own soul, and the world doesn't know. To them, you look unchanged. But inside, you're different, lighter, yet deeper. Free, yet more compassionate. This is the paradox of awakening. You return home only to discover that you have become the home you were seeking. The shock of normalcy at first. It's disorienting. People talk about things that no longer matter to you. They chase validation, gossip, and distraction, and you can see the unconscious machinery behind it all. You want to shake them awake, to say, don't you see? None of this is real. But Jung warned against this impulse. He wrote that one must walk with the mask on, not out of deceit, but out of compassion, because truth cannot be forced. It must be discovered, earned, lived into. So you learn to speak softly, to meet others where they are, to plant seeds instead of delivering sermons. You become less a preacher, and more a presence. The quiet service. You start to realize that awakening was never meant to make you superior. It was meant to make you useful. The deeper your awareness, the quieter your ego becomes. You begin to help others, not by teaching them, but by embodying what you've learned, through patience, kindness, restraint, through the calm that radiates when the storm within has ended. Jung said that the greatest influence a person can have is through the unconscious contagion of being, meaning your vibration, your way of being, shifts others silently, without effort. You don't need to convince anyone of truth. You only need to live it. And when you do, people feel it, even if they can't name why. The weight of vision, seeing what others don't, is both gift and exile. You notice the self-deception, the projection, the collective denial. You sense pain behind laughter, fear beneath power, and emptiness hidden beneath success. It can make you weary. You may long for the days when ignorance was comfort, but this is the burden of consciousness: to see clearly, yet remain kind; to discern darkness, yet not become cynical; to know suffering, yet still choose love. That is the true test of the awakened soul. Because if awareness hardens your heart, it is not wisdom, it is trauma disguised as insight. True seeing always softens. It brings humility, not pride. The integration, in time, your two worlds, inner and outer, begin to merge. You find a rhythm between silence and speech, solitude and society. The insights you once guarded begin to express themselves through your work, your art, your relationships. Awakening ceases to be a dramatic event and becomes a quiet way of being. You start to laugh again, not because the world is perfect, but because you've stopped needing it to be. You understand now that shadow and light are not enemies, but dance partners. And that dance, in all its chaos and beauty, is life itself. The invisible contribution. There's a humility that settles in the awakened one. You stop asking for recognition. You stop needing to be understood. You become content with anonymity. Because you've realized that truth doesn't need an audience, it only needs embodiment. You are no longer the seeker. You are the silent participant in the evolution of consciousness, working quietly through your being. Maybe your gift is a word spoken at the right moment, a piece of art that touches someone's pain, a simple act of patience that shifts another soul's path. That's enough. That's the work. The light that doesn't flicker. Eventually you reach a place beyond striving. The storms still come, fear, loss, confusion, but they no longer drag you under. You've built a center that cannot be shaken. The light you carry no longer depends on peace. It creates peace. You realize that the journey was never about seeing more than others. It was about learning how to stay awake in a world that keeps falling asleep. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate danger and beauty of seeing what others don't. You become responsible for keeping the flame alive, even when no one else can see it, even when no one believes it's there. To see what others don't is not superiority. It is stewardship of light, of truth, of love. Chapter 4: The Eternal Mirror. What awakening demands from the soul? Every soul is a mirror, reflecting both heaven and hell. The danger is not in what you see, but in refusing to recognize it as your own. The mirror awakens after awakening. A strange phenomenon begins to unfold. The world around you stops being random. It becomes reflective. Every encounter, every conflict, every attraction or repulsion is now an invitation to see a part of yourself. You realize the world is not happening to you, it's happening through you. Jung called this the projection mechanism, the psyche's way of showing you what you've disowned. The people you admire reveal your unlived potential. The ones you despise reveal your denied wounds. This is the eternal mirror. It does not flatter. It does not lie. It simply shows, and the deeper your consciousness becomes, the clearer that mirror gets, until there's no longer you and them, only reflections of one infinite mind, seeking to know itself through form. The cost of seeing clearly. Clarity, at first, feels like power, but soon you realize it's a kind of exposure. The illusions that once comforted you begin to dissolve. The fantasy of control, the righteousness of the ego, the belief that others are to blame. You begin to see the subtle ways you create your own suffering through resistance, expectation, and fear. And that realization hurts, because awareness demands accountability. You can no longer point fingers outward. You must face the inner architect of your life. That's the danger of true awakening. You lose the luxury of ignorance, but you gain something far greater: the power to transform pain into wisdom, conflict into growth, shadow into gold. Shadow as teacher. When Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, he wasn't glorifying suffering. He was describing the process of wholeness. Every quality you suppress, anger, envy, lust, fear, doesn't disappear. It waits in the dark. seeking expression through projection or compulsion, until you face it consciously. You are possessed by it unconsciously, so the work of awakening is not escaping darkness, but befriending it. To sit with rage until it shows you where your boundaries were crossed, to meet envy until it reveals your buried desires, to face loneliness until it teaches you how to love yourself. In this way, the shadow becomes an ally, a messenger from the unseen parts of your being. This is shadow integration, not purging the dark, but redeeming it through awareness. The mirror in relationships after awakening. Relationships become a sacred classroom. Every person you meet is a reflection of your evolving consciousness. The one who irritates you reveals your control issues. The one who rejects you exposes your attachment wounds. The one who adores you mirrors your forgotten worth. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What part of me is this showing me?" That shift is liberation, because now, even pain has purpose. Even betrayal becomes revelation. You begin to understand that love is not about possession or perfection. It's about reflection. Two souls mirroring each other's journey back to wholeness. The danger of the spiritual persona with awareness comes another subtle trap. The spiritual ego. You start to see yourself as more conscious, more evolved, more awake than others. It feels like clarity, but it's actually another mask. Jung warned that this inflation is the most dangerous stage of individuation. The ego, terrified of dissolution, tries to hijack enlightenment itself. It starts to say, "I am the light," but the truth is, you are the window through which light passes. The more transparent you become, the less you need to be seen. The quieter you grow, the more truth speaks through you. Real awakening humbles. It strips identity, until nothing remains but awareness itself, a still, vast presence beyond I and mine. The mirror of the collective one's personal illusions dissolve. You begin to sense the larger dream, the collective unconscious. You see how humanity moves like a single organism, each person an expression of the same archetypal forces: greed, fear, violence, compassion. They're not personal flaws, they're universal patterns. You stop demonizing humanity's madness because you recognize it within yourself. And in that compassion, your judgment softens. You start serving life quietly, healing not by preaching, but by existing as a point of coherence in the chaos. You realize that the awakened soul is not separate from the collective. It is the medicine for it. The return to mystery. At the end of all insight, a strange humility dawns. You realize that no matter how much you see, the ultimate truth remains veiled. Life is not a riddle to be solved, it is a mystery to be lived. You stop needing explanations. You start trusting experience. The more conscious you become, the more you bow before the unknown, because you sense the divine intelligence moving through everything. You no longer chase light. You let light move through you. You no longer seek God. You feel God breathing as you. This is not enlightenment as a peak. It's enlightenment as surrender. The final integration. You have walked through the dark, carried light into shadow, faced the mirror of the self. Now you live between worlds, human and divine, finite and infinite, ordinary and transcendent. You know that seeing what others don't was never meant to separate you, it was meant to unite you more deeply with life. You become the silent mirror, reflecting truth without judgment, love without condition, awareness without fear. And as you live that way, you embody the very essence of Jung's lifelong message that consciousness is the path of the soul toward wholeness. The danger of seeing what others don't is forgetting that you, too, are still learning to see. And so, the journey continues inward, always inward.